Let's come for a moment now to the question of how do you begin a class? It's got to start some way. I remember when I was in my doctoral program at the Harvard Business School, I asked one of my senior mentors, a very famous man who'd been on the cover of Time magazine, to come watch me teach. And he said he would, and so I prepared my class that night, and the next day he came in, and Tony Athos was his name. And I taught my class, and then I went down to his office afterward like Odie the dog. What'd you think? What'd you think? What'd you think? And he said, well, Jim, you're boring. Thunk, an arrow to the heart. I thought, okay, tell me about boring. Well, he said, I noticed you play basketball with the doctoral students at noon. I said, I do. I love basketball. He said, well, it's obvious because when you come back from the gym, your face is lit up, you're floating 2 inches off the floor, you're exuding energy. He said, you've got to figure out how to play basketball in the classroom. And I said, basketball is play and teaching is work. Play, work, I don't get that. So I went back to my office and I thought about that for a while. I said, well, wait a minute. In basketball, there's a tip-off. You have to start the game some way, and the same is true in class. You have to start it somehow. If I have the question, I've got the ball, and I pass the question to a student. If they're paying attention, they catch it. If not, off their forehead, out of bounds, we have to start over again. So they catch it, they dribble around, they pass it off to somebody else. The other student catches it, he dribbles around, passes it to somebody else. Maybe somebody takes a shot. We all go, wow, that was a great comment. How beautiful was that? And then we rush off down the court to the other end. You could play basketball in the classroom. Now, I don't know what the analogy is for where you are passionate in life. But Tony's point was, if you're going to teach a class and you're going to start it, you want to start it with a thing that's going to ramp up the level of energy and enthusiasm. The year I left the Harvard Business School, they published student ratings of the professors. And I don't know how, but I was second on that list. And I wanted to find out what the number one guy was doing. His name was Michael Porter. So I went in, I sat in on Michael's class, and I watched him. And one of the things I noticed was that Michael is just a dynamo of energy. He's running up and down the aisles, he's getting in students' faces, he's moving left and right, around the back. He's just, for 90 minutes, an old faithful geyser of energy and enthusiasm. So one thing you might think about as you begin each class is, what are my measures of success in this class? I want to get off to a good start. I want to figure out how to do that. And I want to sustain that, however you define good, throughout the 90 minutes or the 60 minutes or the 75, whatever your class periods are. So for me, that's an energy scale. As I look around the room, if it's low energy, I know something's not working here. And constantly I'm paying attention to my energy dial in the classroom. My energy dial, their energy dials. In fact, I think you can do the same in an organization. If you walk in, you can tell pretty quickly the quality of leadership by the amount of energy that's evident in the employees in the organization, even if that leadership is the local, the regional, the divisional, or the corporate. So how you begin a class is a big deal. One issue is timing. Are you going to start on time or not? I have many colleagues who will start classes 5, 10, 15 minutes late. For me, this is a bad habit. Again, when you teach in various parts of the globe, you may have to educate your students that for this particular course, we're going to start at a particular time. If you signal that we're not going to start till 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, 12 minutes after the appointed hour, students learn that very quickly and they'll start trickling in because they don't want to waste their time. On the other hand, if you lock the doors at 8 o'clock for an 8 o'clock class, students will learn quickly, I better get there on time or I won't be in the class. sort of like when you go to a theater and there's a play and they close the doors because they don't want people walking in front of other people while they're trying to begin and engage with and enjoy the performance. So in the same spirit, if you begin on time, punctually, you will signal to the students the tone, the culture, the kind of classroom atmosphere that you want to have in your course. Which brings us to the issue of how do you signal that. Some of you may say, well, it's pretty severe to lock the doors, although I've known colleagues who've done that. I had a colleague at Harvard who had a very predetermined routine for starting a class. He'd walk in, get his stuff all set up, leave his jacket on or his shirt sleeves down. At 8 o'clock, or when the class was supposed to begin, he'd close the doors. Then he would unbutton his shirt sleeves, roll them up, and by the time he had closed the doors, unbuttoned his shirt sleeves, and rolled them up, everybody in the room knew, without him having to say anything, class is going to begin. You do that once or twice in a row, and it's like Skinnerian operant conditioning. They learn, okay, now let's get ready to go. So he doesn't have to stand up there and yell, settle down, folks, settle down, let's get going, stop talking up there, whatever. The room knows and the peer pressure emanates so that people are ready to go. I thought that was an excellent procedure. You might want to add a bridge to the last class. You could do that, or you could have the students do that. Sometimes I'll ask, what did you learn in the last class? Who remembers what the last class was, and can you tell us the key points? So that they are thinking about how does the course fit into, this class fit into the course that we are participating in. Another technique that I will use frequently is to begin the class with a level 3 question. And by a level 3 question, I mean a question that touches students at their core value level. It connects their history with the main topic of the day. So if the day is about finding the right people to hire in your organization, I might ask, describe a time when you were trying to decide whether or not to go out with somebody else. So something that young people could identify with immediately. What were your criteria? How did you make that decision whether or not to say yes or no, or to ask the other person? And then 2 ways. You could either have them talk with each other about that, or you could ask individuals to raise their hands and write some of their stories on the sideboard or on a flip chart. What this will do is touch them with their own experience, their own assumptions about the way the world works, so that when you're now talking about this in a larger corporate setting of what's the recruiting system here, what's the selection system, is it effective, ineffective, they've got a parallel analog that's now been brought up out of history and maybe not being conscious at the moment into consciousness, so it connects them with the topic. Now, there's an art to finding the right level 3 question, a way of grounding the students in the topic of the day by touching on their personal experience. But I invite you to consider that as one way of thinking about how to start a class and raise the level of energy and deepen the level of commitment to the discussion at hand. Another thing you can do is select a bellwether in the room, somebody who you think is going to shape the discussion one way or another. It may be somebody who has nothing to do with the expertise of the day. So the last thing I would want to do, for example, in an accounting course, is always call on the CPAs in the room. Because then I know all the non-CPAs in the room are going to be lost, overwhelmed, going too fast, disengaged, and they may even just give up. And the CPAs want to show off what they know and have their status raised in their eyes of their classmates because they've been there. Well, if those other people had spent 3 or 4 or 5 years doing the same thing, they would also be there. So the bellwether may not be the person who is the expert in the class, relatively speaking, on today's topic. It might be just the opposite, because that bellwether is going to ask good questions, or is going to be struggling with the kind of analytic techniques that other people will also be struggling with. The opening question, I think, is a really critical one. As I mentioned before, case classes typically have 3 chunks or more: problem identification, analysis, action planning. A typical opening question, therefore, might be, what are the problems here? And or you could just say, whoever's number came up, Shiva, what's your opening statement? Or Shenzhen, how would you like to begin today? So that gives the students the opportunity to set an agenda. If you have time, you may want to spend a little segment of time focusing on that to help each other think about, we don't want to just rely on the instructor to set the agenda, but we want to find out if we can ask the right questions before we begin. So don't run over class, don't start late. Make sure you set a predictable series of routine signals that the class can learn from, meaning we're ready to go. You might think about several ways, either a bridge to the last class, a level 3 question on the topic, a good opening question, or selecting a bellwether as a way of getting the class started and off on the right foot.